Aloha, and welcome to the monthly public presentation of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Since 1990, the Vegetarian Society has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education, as we've grown to become one of the largest all-volunteer, nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. It is now time to introduce our special guest. We're thrilled to have with us tonight Dr. Rosane Oliveira. Rosane Oliveira, DVM, PhD, is the founding director of integrative medicine at the University of California, Davis School of Medicine. She has over 20 years of experience as a molecular geneticist and has a special interest in nutritional genetics and genomics, which explore the interplay between diet and genes in the prevention of disease and the promotion of health and longevity. She is a native of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and has lived in the U.S. since 2003. For more information, you can visit the UC Davis Integrative Medicine website, which she'll be explaining more about to you later, www.ucdev.com. Her presentation tonight is entitled, Stop Blaming Your Genes. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rosane Oliveira.
We are here today to talk about stop blaming your genes, because when you talk about disease and when you talk about obesity specifically, it's very easy for us to just sometimes give up and not even give it our best shot because we believe it's in our genes and there's nothing that we can do about it, right? So how many of you had either said it in the past or have heard someone say in the past, it's in my genes, there's nothing I can do about it, right? So as you're going to see, I can tell you that every single person in my family in Brazil is overweight. I'm the only one that is not. So I got the genes from my mom and from my dad. My grandma was overweight. My cousins, it doesn't matter if they're men or women, all of them. And I have the same genes. And I'm not the overweight. I'm not overweight like they are. But I'm the only one who eats different than all of them. And so I'm a geneticist, and for me it's very easy to hear people, there's a great deal of genetics that go into increased risk of disease or increased risk of being overweight or being obese, but it's up to us. So there's a lot of room for our actions and our choices on a daily basis to really make a change. So at the end of the presentation, I'm very sure nobody here will ever blame their genes again. Okay, overweight, that's what we're going to be discussing. And then when we talk about overweight, usually, like I said, we say it's my genes, or I have big bones, it's in my genes, so there's nothing I can do about it. And the other one that I hear a lot is, I don't have time to exercise, and that's why I'm overweight. So, and then I always like to touch on that because exercise is very, very important, but one thing that we keep repeating over and over is that you always lose weight in the kitchen, you get fit in the gym. The gym or being active is for you to be fit, for you to have a level of fitness that you don't have now. But weight is never ever lost in the gym, no matter how many times you keep telling yourself. Weight is always lost in the kitchen. And the key is eating the right food, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So when it comes to genes related to overweight and obesity, many people believe there are genes that are related to, really making you eat more, and there's no such genes. All the genes related to obesity or overweight are related to two centers or multiple centers. Centers related to satiety, the centers in the brain that said, yes, you've had enough to eat, now you can wait for the next meal. And the ones that control appetite, that would say, now it's time for me to eat. Okay? this is, it looks like it's complicated, but it's not. I'm going to simplify. So this is an area of a brain called the hypothalamus. That's where energy balance is maintained. And it's maintained by this guy here. Let me show you here. Leptin. I know when we talk about food, a lot of people discuss glucose and insulin. Oh, don't eat this because there's insulin spike, and insulin spike is bad for you. So I want to move our attention away from insulin and pay attention to leptin. Leptin is this guy here that basically works like that. We eat, then fat gets stored for later, so we eat. We spend the energy, we spend whatever we ate, we spend that in energy, and then we keep some for the future. Otherwise, we would have to be eating 24/7, right? Then the fat cells will secrete leptin. And this leptin then is going to tell the brain that you had enough to eat. So the brain needs to see the leptin, the message. And once that happens, then increased leptin is going to signal the brain, you've had enough to eat, now it's time to stop. And that's wonderful if you're eating the right food and you're not eating excess. But what happens in most cases is that, and just so you know, so anytime, as you can imagine, you eat, you get the energy stored, the fat cells secrete leptin, the brain sees leptin. So when the brain does not see leptin, so when it's low leptin, the brain sees starvation. And if it sees starvation, it says, you need to eat right now, okay? The problem is, so there's a condition, a genetic condition that is called leptin deficiency. In these individuals, they have a mutation and they don't produce leptin. So they continue to eat, and they never have the signal from leptin telling the brain, you've had enough to eat. So they will never stop eating. So when I give this talk, a lot of people say, maybe I have this mutation. No, you don't. This has only been described in one family in the UK in 15 individuals. So everybody else has something else, and it's not leptin deficiency. It's what they call leptin resistance. Many of you may have heard physicians or researchers talk about insulin resistance, right? It's you produce enough insulin, but your body doesn't respond to it. So leptin resistance is the same thing. You're producing enough, but your brain doesn't see it. And you develop leptin resistance anytime your insulin is high. So when you're in constant high insulin, leptin is high, but the brain doesn't see it. So anytime you have increased insulin, you were making almost impossible for your brain to see that you've had enough to eat, and you're going to continue to eat. So that's what we see in people that are overweight, obese. That's what we see in type 2 diabetes, which is related to obesity as well. So, and then just to show, there is a mouse model for type 2 diabetes and obesity, and the feature, the mutation that this mouse has is that it's leptin deficiency. It's leptin deficient, so it doesn't produce leptin. So the mouse only eats and doesn't move. And then the mouse will only move if you move the food from one side of the cage to the next, and the mouse is going to go to the next side and then not move again. Okay, so when we talk about people that are overweight and obese, it's easy to understand why it's hard for them to lose weight and why exercising won't help, or why is it that it's very hard for them to even have the drive to exercise. It's all linked, unless they change what they are eating. And it's not about calorie restriction. We discussed this yesterday. It's not how much you eat, it's what you eat. And if you change what you eat, the signal is going to start being picked up, and then somebody is going to start having the shift, and somebody that doesn't want to exercise will also all of a sudden start wanting to exercise. And like I said, you probably heard this many times, that genetics loads the gun, so we can all be walking around with a loaded gun that can be in your drawer or in your closet. The trigger is going to be the environment. And then we can go further and say the trigger is also your lifestyle, is what you eat, it's how you manage stress, it's all of that. If you smoke or not, it's the environment and all the lifestyle choices you make. But most importantly is diet, right? So you can have bad genes, but if your diet is right, those bad genes may never be expressed and you may be protected against disease or being overweight, or that's the focus of today's lecture, okay? Just to give an example about the interplay of genes and diet so you can understand before we move on. And this is not related to obesity, this is related to risk of heart attack, so risk of myocardial infarction, and risk of hypertension. There is a gene here, this gene here, CYP1A2, that if you have a mutation in it, it says that you cannot metabolize caffeine fast. So you're a slow metabolizer. If you cannot metabolize caffeine fast, caffeine stay in your system, and caffeine is going to increase your risk to having hypertension or developing hypertension, and also having a heart attack. But if you don't have the mutation, you're a fast metabolizer, which means you can drink your coffee and caffeine is going to be out of your system in no time. So it's not going to linger around to increase your chances to either have hypertension or myocardial infarction, okay? So if you do a study, which is what most people do when they take the whole population, and this is just to explain to you why it's so hard to do research in nutrition, and why is it that sometimes we have an experiment that says coffee is good for you, drink 3 cups of coffee and it's protective against heart attacks, and then you have another study that says coffee is bad for you, and the more you drink, the higher your chances of having a heart attack. So if you just get the whole population, but you don't pay attention to their genetics, the genes that they have, you may come to the conclusion that coffee is okay as long as you drink less than 4 cups a day. Because only when you drink more than 4 cups, your chance of having a heart attack increases, okay? But if we take into consideration the population genetics, now is the same group of people, but now we have the people that metabolize caffeine fast and the group that metabolizes caffeine slow. You see that the ones that metabolize caffeine slow, the risk starts to increase after 2 cups, not 4. And the ones that metabolize caffeine fast, if they drink coffee, is the opposite, is protective against heart disease, okay? And then to make it more complicated, if you take into consideration someone's age, you see that the effect is even higher. For the younger the person, the worse it is the effect of caffeine. I don't know if you follow the news, but every so often, at least once a month, we see a story of a teenage person who drank gallons of, I don't even know the names, Red Bull and all of that, and they went to the hospital and they died. Like 18-year-old, 22-year-old is likely because of this. Because when the younger you are, the more susceptible you are. So if you were under the age of 50, and if you drink more than 1 cup a day, and you have the mutation to be a slow metabolizer, your risk of having heart problems is very high, okay? So someone like, I am a slow metabolizer, I know. So caffeine is bad for me, and I feel it when I have small amounts. But I know, so is the gene that I have bad per se, or because I know that I have the gene, if I avoid caffeine, I'm protected? correct? So I'm here to show you that it's the same with everything else, including obesity. It doesn't matter if you have the gene. I have a gene for obesity because that's the next one we're going to cover. But it's not the gene that is regulating my fate. It's the foods that I choose to eat. So this is a gene, and it's the second gene, and the last one we're going to talk, and then it's going to be a little more fun the rest of the lecture. So this gene, let's see here, ApoA5, what it says is, if you have a mutation, and I have this mutation also, and I don't have just one copy, I have 2 copies, so no escape. I have 2 copies of this gene, and it says anytime that you eat more than 30% of your calories from fat, your risk of being overweight or being obese is a lot higher than the rest of the population, okay? But this gene, this mutation, is present in 9 out of 10 people. So 9 out of 90% of you in this room have at least 1 mutation. I have 2, so which is like maybe 25% of you will have the 2 variants, which is mine. So for me, the amount of fat in my diet really matters. Okay? So let me go back here. All right. So 30%. And the thing is, it's 30% for total fat. But the same relationship exists for monounsaturated fats. And it's something else that I always like to talk, because when we see people talking about fats, they talk about good fats and bad fats. And if it's a good fat, you don't have to worry about anything. And it's not the case, because monounsaturated fats, the one that we find in mainly avocados, some nuts, they also increase your risk of being overweight and being obese, not just because of these genes, but because of many other genes. So it's not because of fat, it's not as bad as saturated fat that you can eat as much as you want, okay? So for monounsaturated fats, anytime you eat more than 11% of your calories, your chances of being overweight already increase, okay? All right, so who can guess who? This is me and my identical twin sister. So if you think about twins, identical twins, they are identical in every way. So they have exact the same genes, which means that my sister and I have the same genes, we have to have the same fate, correct? We have to have the same body. But what happens is, this is just to show that we are identical, because sometimes when I gave this lecture, people say, how can you prove that you're truly identical? This is just to show, this is what they call genotyping. It sees how many point mutations you have in your genome, and then it's very unlikely that 2 people will have 100% similarity in all the mutations that they have. And they test for over 924,000 mutations, and my mutations are exact the same as she has. So we have the same genetic. But with something that you can see, and this is my sister and I 20 years ago. That's the last time we had the same weight. So same genetics, same weight, until this picture was taken. Then after that, I moved out, and she continued to live in a house, but we start eating diets in a different way. And this is what happened. So this here is me, and this is my sister. Between 1995 and I stopped in 2012, but it's pretty much up until here. You see that my weight is pretty much the same, except for this curve here. Here is when I moved to the US. And I'm not kidding, but it's not US fault. It's what I say. I said yesterday, when I was in Brazil, my mom would cook my beans and I would have vegetables everywhere. I moved to the US and I know how to cook, but I just didn't want to take the time to cook myself, so I was eating the Boca burgers And the cheese, I was vegetarian at the time. I didn't go completely vegan until 2008. Interesting enough is when the curve started going back and continue. But just so you know, understand that curve, right? But with my sister, you see that she goes up, then she goes down, then up again, down and up again. And every time she goes down is a different diet. She tried everything. She tried Weight Watchers, counting calories, I cannot even remember, shakes, the ones that come in a package that you open and you add the hot water and you mix, and horrible. Yes, all kinds. Each one, that she would lose a little bit of weight and then gain again. Just so you understand, so this one is calorie counting, is Weight Watchers, but don't tell anyone. So calorie counting, and then this is what they called low carb. But I'm going to show you that it's not low carb, it was actually low fat diet, and that's why it worked so well. So what I did was, so this is what we did, because sometimes I love my sister so much, I said, are you going to start a new diet? I'll do it with you. So I would do it with her. And this one, I did it. And you see that her carbohydrate, it was called low carb diet. But she was eating 70% of her calories were coming from carbohydrates. And it went up all the way to 80%, 70 to 80%. And she was getting around 15% protein, and her fat was just going low and low and low. You see, that's the major difference. Carbohydrate, mine started low and started going up, and my fat started going down. And you see that the major difference here is the amount of fat that I was eating versus her, and she lost twice as much weight than I did. Just to show, so here they told her not to eat rice or potatoes, but they also told her no oil. Nuts, only 10 nuts a day. And so she didn't have, and no dairy, but she was not eating any dairy anyway, so it was very, very low fat, and that's why it worked. Okay, carbohydrates and fat. Okay. So what I did is, all of that, it was just an idea that I had to try and explain, how is it that two people can have the exact same genes and one person struggle with weight for 20 years and the other doesn't, right? So I'm a geneticist, and I say, why didn't I think about it before? So I went back to our records, and everything that you've seen so far, it was just retrospectively done. So I went back and I tried to understand the past. But then the idea that we had is, I said, you come and you live with me for 4 months, and you don't have to worry about cooking, because she doesn't like to cook, and I say, whatever I eat, you eat. And we're not controlling portions. You may be eating more than me sometimes. As long as you eat what I eat at the house, and that's it. And we didn't exercise. So it's no difference in exercise. And so that's what so here is the calorie counting. This is the low carb. And here's when she's plant-based. Now I want you to notice that here's after 3 months only. She lost about half of the weight that she lost when she lost the most. But I want you to see how her markers changed significantly. So here's total cholesterol. She lost a lot of weight when she was counting calories. So the amount she was eating, not what she was eating. But her cholesterol was getting worse, you see? And then she started losing weight when it was low fat. Then it went down to about 174. But when she ate plant-based, it was the first time in all these years that her marker was identical to mine. She still had to lose another 30 pounds, but her biochemistry was identical to the one of a thin person. And I like to show this to people that struggle with weight, because sometimes it takes such a long time for you to actually lose the weight outside. But after just 3 months, you're already a completely different person inside. Metabolically, you're on the right path. You just have to stick with it, okay? So this is LDL, same thing. She lost weight, but LDL went up. Here, LDL went a little down. And then when she ate plant-based, her LDL was just like mine. Even though she's still 30, 35 pounds overweight, her LDL was very low. And then here's interesting, glucose. We hear a lot of people say, yes, don't eat potatoes, spike glucose. Don't eat this, spike glucose. glucose spiking is a good thing. We eat glucose. If we didn't have a spike, it would mean that we're not taking up the glucose we need, and then comes insulin and wash it out and put it away, and that's the right thing to do. But if you see glucose, it's very hard for us to see any pattern. So my glucose sometimes are higher than my sister, and I'm thinner than her. I'm 50 pounds lighter, okay? But here's the interesting thing, and as I always say, always pay attention to your insulin, never to your glucose. And remember when we discussed at the beginning, anytime your insulin is high, your body's producing leptin, but the brain doesn't see. Anytime your insulin is high and the brain doesn't see leptin, you don't get the signal that you've had enough to eat, so you will continue to eat. And that's why it's hard to lose weight if you're eating things that will make your insulin go up. So if you notice, every time my sister gained weight, her insulin went up. Every time she lost weight, her insulin went down. Insulin was the only marker of all of them that we checked that corresponded to her weight. And it was so much so that you could even predict if she was in a trajectory of gaining weight or losing weight before you even started, okay? Then here went up again, and this is when we started. So we started putting her on a plant-based diet. Her insulin was 14, and her leptin was 49. So her body's producing leptin like crazy, but her brain doesn't see. She won't stop eating. She won't be able to lose weight as long as the leptin is at the high, okay? After 6 weeks, her insulin is half, and her leptin went from 50 almost to 14. And then finally, you see that after 3 months, her insulin is exactly like mine. She's eating like me, so her body is responding the same way that the body responds to my food and me, so we have the same genes. And you see that leptin is now a lot less, so it's around 3 from 50, but this 3 is enough to signal the brain you've had enough, and she'll be able to lose weight and not overeat. Okay, so the best blood biomarkers and the best results when she was eating low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet. I know I'm preaching to the core here, but when I give this lecture, a lot of people just don't understand the importance of avoiding animal protein and animal fat, but fat in general as well, which is what I'm going to be talking about. Someone yesterday asked me, when you talk about percentage of a food, is it percentage by weight or percentage by as a factor of calorie? And the right way of doing this is always a percentage to our total calories. And that is why it's so confusing here in the US. But I'm just going to go back real fast, and we're going to discuss this in the next one. The standard American diet is around 44% fat, which means if someone is eating 2,000 calories, or almost, not 1,000, it would be 50%. So it would be like 800 something calories are coming from fat, which is a lot, okay? What Americans call a low-fat diet is about 35% coming from fat. If you remember from the beginning of my lecture, I said ApoA5 is a gene that regulates your weight according to the amount of fat you eat. 9 out of 10 people will have at least one mutation, and maybe 25% of us will have 2 mutations, which is my case. Anytime you eat more than 30% of your calories from fat, your chances of being overweight are higher. So what Americans call low fat is not low fat, and that's why nobody is losing weight in this country following a low fat diet. What we call low fat, it's always below 20%, ideally below 10, but I don't want you to hate me, so I say 20%. And it's hard enough, believe me. If you have oil in your diet, it's almost certain that it's above 20%. And I'll explain why. Okay, so here is the problem and why a lot of people think they're eating low fat when they are not. Because when we talk about low fat, we talk about percentage by weight. So a low fat milk, 2% milk, it would be ideal if what people believe is true, it was true, that 90%, 98% of the fat was removed and you're only keeping 2%. But this is by weight, not by calorie. If you do the math correctly, this milk now is 36% fat. So it's above 20%, above the 30%, which is the bare minimum that when you start seeing the fat. So that's why nobody's losing weight. So the problem, now the other example that I like to give is steamed veggies. Vegetables are very low calorie food. Anytime you mix a very low calorie food with oil, you're going to tip the balance, the scale to be a high fat diet, believe it or not. So if you get 1 cup of steamed veggies and you add 1 teaspoon of olive oil, and I use 1 teaspoon because I know exactly what most people use. 1 teaspoon. Nobody uses more than 1 teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil. You can sell this meal as a fat-free meal because for you to label is a matter of how much fat and the weight, and you can say this is a fat-free meal. But when you calculate according to the calories, now 45% of your calories are coming from fat. So you think, and that's why most people that go on a diet and eat salad gain weight instead of losing weight, because they get something that is very low in calories, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the carrots, and they pour in high-fat dressings. Or sometimes I don't use dressing, I just use plain olive oil because of the good fats. The good fats are making all your salads be 50% calories coming from fat. You're never going to lose weight, okay? All right, so, and when it comes to fat, nothing will bring more fat into your diet than animal protein, animal sources of protein, right? So you see here, and dairy is the champion, always. So I was vegetarian for 20 years before I went vegan, so I say that with all the love I wanted someone to have when I was vegetarian. But being vegetarian, eat dairy, doesn't help anyone because, or it doesn't help you, because you get a lot of fat. So this is 1 slice of cheese. Almost 80% of the calories are coming from fat. 80%. More than 1 slice of bacon, which is 66%. Nothing. It's the #1 source of saturated fat and saturated fat in the American diet for vegetarians or omnivores is dairy. Then you have red meat, same amount of fat as eggs. Then you have salmon, having almost the same total amount of fat of eggs and red meat. And now, the good ones. All the fruits and veggies, we say they are naturally low in fats. We have, when we talk about fat and avoiding oils, a lot of people always ask me, but don't we need fat? Yes, we do, but all of these foods will have fat. You see, strawberries, 8% of calories from strawberries are coming from fat, 16% of calories in oats come from fat, 10% of calories in broccoli comes from fat. We get plenty of fat. We just don't need to get concentrated amounts of fat that come in oil, okay? But look at this one here. Potatoes, the villain for anyone that wants to lose weight. Avoid potatoes. Potatoes have 1% of fat, 0 saturated fat. So the problem is the potato or is the way you eat the potato. So you start off with a perfect food and you destroy it, okay? So that's what most people do. So the potato that was 1% fat, now you added crab, 37%. Here you added cauliflower and just a little bit of cheese, and now it's 38% fat, and butter, bacon, chives, 31%. So the one that has cauliflower and cheese is the champion with, so it's a vegetarian potato and has more fat than the other two that have meat. So we hear this a lot. Dr. Colin Campbell saying what we have nowadays is diseases of affluence. It's excess of calories, mainly animal fat and animal protein. So much so that research has shown that just 1.5 ounces of meat per day already almost guarantees that someone's BMI is going to be above 25. And among all the meats, which you think is the worst? Chicken, you're right. Chicken start getting bad with 0.7 ounces, like 20 grams of chicken a day. It's enough to already predict that someone's going to be overweight. It's the worst of them all. Okay, and then nuts. I like to talk about nuts because nuts are plant-based. A lot of people just think that you can eat handfuls of nuts. It's not like that. We say nuts can be eaten as garnish. If you don't have weight problems, then go ahead and eat. Some people may have double mutation against the bad gene that I have, ApoA5, go ahead. But most people will benefit from not eating excess nut. And if it's an oil made out of nut, then really stay away. So just so you have an idea, so this is all the nuts, and this is the amount of fat in each one of them. 72%, 89, 77, 94. So all very, very high. And even though some of them, and you always going to have some saturated fat in them as well. So can you eat them? Yes, you can, but not the oils and not in excess, okay? Chocolate. So yesterday someone asked me about chocolate, and I showed this one slide from today's presentation. Chocolate is not a healthy food, no matter how dark it is, okay? Why? Because cocoa powder has been shown to have tons of polyphenols, right? Coffee beans also. But can we only find polyphenols in cocoa beans or coffee beans? No. We find in any of the other fruits and vegetables and the whole grains that you eat. So if you want polyphenols, you don't need chocolate as an excuse to get your polyphenols, because first, most people don't eat the cocoa bean, they don't eat the cocoa powder, which has a lot less fat and almost no sugar. What they eat is the chocolate that gets that, and add cocoa butter, and you add the sugar. So chocolate is 52 to 77% fat, depending on the brand that you buy. It has between 29 and 47% saturated fat. It comes from the chocolate. Monounsaturated 16 to 26. So some people say, oh, it's monounsaturated fat is a good fat. I don't have to worry about it. But if you remember from the beginning of the presentation, anytime you eat more than 11% of your calories from monounsaturated, your chance of being overweight are already higher, okay? And chocolate has caffeine too. So if you're a slow metabolizer of caffeine, chocolate's not going to be something that you should be indulged anyway, okay? Which is my case. Do I eat chocolate sometimes? Yeah, I do. But I used to eat a lot more, and I avoid it. And when I eat chocolate, I always pay the price. So here, I'm just going to switch gears, and this is going to be really fast. Because when you talk about animal protein, animal foods in general, in a diet, it's very easy to just start thinking about saturated fat and cholesterol, the pieces, you know, of each one of the foods. But like I said in the lecture yesterday, we don't eat the pieces. We don't go to the market and we say, I want a pound of, you know, low leucine protein, and can you keep saturated fat below 5% for me? No, you get a package, right? Food is a package. You get something good, you get all the good. But if there's something bad, you get all the bad with it too. But something else that happens is once that food is in us, it changes us as well. It changes our biochemistry, it changes how a gene is expressed, and it changes our gut microbiota, right? So we know that our immune system, like the way we respond to infections, it's all related to the gut. Gut health is essential, right? So how is it that animal food will affect our gut flora? So let's go back to the obese mice, or mouse that I said at the beginning. This is the mouse that does not produce leptin. So it does nothing but eat all day long because the brain never receives the signal you've had enough to eat. So what researchers did is there a difference in the microbes that the lean mouse has versus the obese? And they say, yes, there is. The obese will have more of these guys here, the firmicutes, and the lean mice who's going to have more of the bacteroidetes. So but what is it that this means? So what they did is a fantastic experiment, again, with twins, because if you're working with twins, then you try to remove the genetic variants, right? So they work with 4 pairs of twins, and the thing that they had to do with the twins is have the same problem as me and my sister, the same problem that we have. You have to have at least 5-point differential in your BMI. And you see, this twin here set, one has a BMI of 23, the other 32, there's 25 and 31, this one 19.5 and 30, 24, 33. So a good range difference. And they say, let's get the microbiome from each one of the twins and see what is it going to happen if we put it in mice. How is it? Are the mice going to get obese because of the microbiota or not? And that's exactly what they show here. The mice that receive the bugs, the gut flora from the lean twins, they all remain lean. And the mice that receive the gut microbiota from the obese twin, they became obese. But then the question is it the microbiota that is different and it will make you obese, or is what you eat that changes the microbiota, right? So do you have a say? And actually you do, which is what they show here. So what they did is, mice have this very weird habit called coprophagy. So they eat each other's poop. Yes, it's disgusting, but it happens. But it's very good if you study microbiota, because what is it that you can do? You can make a lean mouse be roommates with an obese mouse. And because they're going to eat each other's poop, you can see what's going to happen in the end. Is the lean going to eat the obese mouse poop and become obese, or is the obese going to become lean? Okay, so that's what they did. So they housed lean mice together, obese mice together, obese with lean together, and then they tried to see what is going to happen. And it was fascinating because what they show is that the obese mice, that the roommate was an obese mouse or mice, because they were multiple in the same cage, they all gain weight, a lot of weight. This is all fat. The lean mouse that housed with the lean mouse didn't gain any weight. Now the obese that were with the lean, you see the lean remained lean, but the obese got put on some weight, but not as much. So just the obese being with the lean was helping already, okay? And it was interesting enough, so this is the mouse eating mouse food. So what they did is, now let's give the mice the same type of food the Americans eat, right? So they say, let's give them a low saturated fat, high fruits and vegetables diet and see what happens. So the same thing you see here, the obese that housed with the obese gain weight. The lean that housed with the lean, they lost weight. They already had the microbiota to not gain weight, but low saturated fat, high fruits and vegetables, they lost more weight. Okay, they were together and they got thinner. And then the obese here gained some weight, but a lot less than here. And the lean gained weight, which shouldn't happen. So what did I do? I went to the study and I read it and I say, I bet they ate more than 30% of the calories from fat, and they did. So it was low saturated fat, but not low total fat. You know, that's a difference. But anyway, and then this is the last thing I'm going to show to you here. Then they did the opposite. They gave the mice a high saturated fat diet, low fruits and vegetables. And what happened is everybody gained weight. So these guys here, there was lean, living with lean bacteria in them. But they ate the wrong food, they gained weight because it couldn't protect. So it's not the bug that is making you overweight, it's the food you give the bug that is keeping the right bug in check, all right? So that's basically what this is. And this, just to go back what it says, it shows here that this is the good bacteria that the lean mouse they get from the lean twin. And you see here that the obese, before the obese start living with the lean mouse, they didn't have this good bacteria. And after they start living, they got the bacteria that protect them from being obese, okay? And so this is before they had a majority of these here, and now they have a lot less of this here. And just to go back to my experiment with my sister, I cannot explain why. I should have had like half of the amount of this, because this guys here, this bacteria that is high in people that have problem being overweight, they are very efficient in metabolizing or digesting fat. So this is basically what it is. The more fat you eat, the more of this type of a bacteria you have. But you see that my sister has at least 25% more of the bacteria that loves fat. So when you bring down the amount of fat you eat, you're going to bring down the amount of those guys that you don't want anyway. You want the guys that don't like fat. You want these guys here. Okay? So this is another experiment just to show people that eat plant-based, this is the amount of fiber they get versus people that eat animal-based, almost no fiber. And this is the amount of fat, so high fiber, low fat. People that eat animal proteins is the opposite, very low fiber, very high fat. And you see here that the microbiota is constant, and here you see it's all over the place. You eat animal protein, then you start bringing bugs that were not there before, which is not what you want to happen. And this is the last time about microbiota that I want to point out is when we know there is a link between the amount of animal protein and fat we eat and cardiovascular disease, but sometimes it's very hard to point out what is it is actually causing the disease. And in this very interesting study, what they found out is that animals that did not have gut microbiota, so they were what they call germ-free. There's mice that you breed to have no contact with the environment, so they're completely germ-free. There's no bug in them. And they gave these animals animal protein, and they did not develop atherosclerosis. And then they put gut microbiota in them and gave them animal food, and they start showing atherosclerosis. So meaning that what we feed our gut bacteria not only is protecting us from being overweight, but it's also protecting us from having cardiovascular disease. Because if you give vegans meat, they will not produce this molecule that is going to increase your risk of having atherosclerosis. Why? Because vegans don't eat meat often enough to keep the type of bacteria that will digest animal protein. Okay? So that's what they did. And people that eat meat every day, they keep the bugs that can metabolize animal protein and produce the molecule that is going to then increase the risk. So that's very important. What you feed yourself is what you're feeding your gut bacteria. And that's what is going to ultimately also help you decrease your risk of being overweight or having cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes. So what should you eat to make your genes and your gut bacteria happy and never ever have to worry about your weight again? That's the answer we know. It's a low-fat, whole-food, plant-based diet. You want to eat everything that is on the left of this graph, so fruits and vegetables, legumes, beans, peas, lentils, and complex carbohydrates. Nothing on the right, so a little bit of nuts sometimes. Popcorn is okay as long as there's no oil, but avoid all of the other things. Most of you got the magnet outside. I don't have one, but it's basically showing what we said here. Anything in the green and the yellow zone, you can eat as much as you want. You never gain weight. And when it's here on the orange, you should be careful. Those are the things that are not whole anymore. They're not whole for here. There's an apple, there's a broccoli, here's a potato. Anything that you identify, you see, and I know what I'm eating, it's whole, right? So I can see this is a bean. So anytime you start processing a little bit, even if you're eating a whole wheat bagel, it is whole wheat, but a bagel you don't pick up from the ground, right? So it has been processed somewhat. So anytime that you start losing the shape of the whole food, the calories increase. So can you eat? Yes, but it's not going to be good to eat in the same amounts that you eat food from the first two categories, right? And from the red zone, you should really, really, watch out and avoid. And just to show some health swaps, see if you stop eating your meat, instead of getting cholesterol, you get zero cholesterol if you eat edamame. Edamame is soy. Soy foods tend to be higher in fat, so you have to pay attention to that too. But decrease the amount of saturated fat, decrease the amount of everything, no trans fat, and you actually start getting some fiber. But instead of edamame, if you bring broccoli, then your fat is very, very low. 10%, so anytime it's below 20% is good. So no monounsaturated fats, 3% saturated fat, a lot of fiber. Instead of chicken, you should be eating your beans. So beans here, 0.01% fat, no fat in beans, and a lot of fiber. Then you see here that salmon for tofu, it may make sense, it brings you more protein, but tofu, like I said, any soy product is going to be higher in fat. So can you eat? Yes, you can, especially when it's whole, like tempeh and tofu, not TSB, right? Texturized soy protein, that not so much, but the other ones are fine. But just so you know, you're going to have a little more of the fat. I know Miyoko is going to be next month's speaker, and I love her products. I buy her cheese when people come to my place, but cashew cheese is something that's going to always be high in fat. So can you eat it? Yes, you can, but it's nut-based and it's going to be higher in fat. So you're going to have a lot of, you're not going to have the same amount of saturated fat, almost no monounsaturated, a little bit of fiber and such, but it's a high-fat food, so you should pay attention to that too. Because it's very easy when we are going vegan, because I know that the hardest thing to give up is cheese, right? So that's why it's easier to be vegetarian, and I was for the longest time. And when we transitioned to being vegan, one of the first thing we want to see is, I want a good cheese substitute, right? So, and then we try to eat as much as we can so we don't miss the taste. So you have to pay attention to that. This is something else that you all got, and if you didn't, you can get now. Basically tells you, if you are in the grocery store and you want to buy something that has a label in it. If you buy Whole Foods, there's no label. You can get an eggplant, there's no label in an eggplant, correct? But if you want to buy something from a package, you can, as long as you pay attention to some guidelines. One of the most important ones, now you understand why, fat should be below 20%. And this goes with no added oil, because almost certain, if you read the ingredients and there's one type of oil, it's almost guaranteed it's going to be more than 20% fat. Very rare exceptions. And then we teach you how to do it. Basically, you divided the number of calories from fat. From here, the total calories, it has to be less than 20%. So here, 20 calories, 270, and calories from fat is 25, which is 10%. So this is safe. So you could eat up to, if here calorie from fat was 52, more or less, you still would be okay. But almost certain you wouldn't have oil as one of the ingredients. The other thing that you need to pay attention to is the amount of sodium. So, and very easy too, sodium is whatever the amount of calories that you have to have the same number or below. So if you have 270 calories in a serving, the amount of sodium has to be 270 or below. Very easy. If it's high, don't buy. And then no trans fat, zero cholesterol. If it's plant-based, it's going to be zero cholesterol. And so, but if you go to the back, then explains everything. And after you read and you understand, you can just detach this and you carry this as a credit card until you don't even need it anymore because you know everything. I know I always say that. In life, the harder thing to do and the right thing to do are usually the same thing. So for people that are vegetarian to protect animals, usually they say it's very hard to do it, but you do it, it's hard, but it's the right thing to do and you do it. So it's the same thing about being plant-based. So, and if you don't believe me, all these nice people do it. So if they can do it, so can you, right? And before I forget, so if you want everything that I talked to you about, how to read the food label, how to use the magnet, the importance of avoiding oils, everything is in our blog. We publish 2 articles every week. You can go to the blog, it's here, the website is UCD, from University of California, Davis, Integrative Medicine, so ucdim.com, and you put your first name, your email, submit, and you start receiving our posts. Usually I tell people that they can go straight to this post if they want. Is the 21 resources for a food day challenge. We run a food day challenge every October. We're going to run again this October, where we coach people for 21 days to be plant-based with us. But if you go to this particular blog post, then all the frequent asked questions are going to be there with links. Where do I get my calcium? Or how much protein do I need? If I'm an athlete, how much protein do I need? How is it that I calculate all of that? Everything is there. But there's a series that we wrote this year, is in January, which covers what I call the Fab 4. The 4 foods that if you eat every day, you're doing great. And it's beans, greens, berries, and seeds. So every day, so when we put together our meal plan for the 21-day challenge, we taught people how to create a meal that has a bean, that has a green, that has a seed, and has a berry in it as dessert or something. Okay? And you can understand. And when you say seeds, seeds in general, like chia seeds, flax seeds, are all good. But if you want your omega-3s, 1 tablespoon of flaxseed every single day, ground flaxseed, and you have all the omega-3 you need. There's no need for fish. And right now, this is the series that we are writing, is the SOS. How many people know about SOS free diet? 3 people. SOS stands for sugar, oil, and salt. So it's not about being vegan, vegetarian. It's not about what you're avoiding. It's actually what you're eating instead. That's why we say plant-based. And it should be plant-based and low SOS foods. So low added sugar, low added or no oil, ideally, and no added salt. And we have a whole series. We started 6 weeks ago because we publish once a week. We cover sugar, sugar substitutes, sugar addiction, coconut oil 2 weeks ago, fish oil last week, and olive oil is going to be tomorrow. So it's midnight in California, so 9 p.m. today. This article is going to be available, and you can already read. And then we're going to continue with salt next week, so you get all of the benefits. And we also have this placemat where we share where you can find the science, how to get started, what the books we recommended, how to try the recipes, and how to find inspiration. And about the recipes, also on the blog, every Sunday we share a new recipe. So we started the blog a year and a half ago, so we have a lot of recipes to share too. So with that, I just want to thank you for your attention, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Okay, the question is about my genetic testing. If I have a preference. I did use 23andMe as well. To me, they are affordable and they are a good way of someone to start. The problem with 23andMe now is that, and it used to be in the past too, is you don't get a lot of information. You get all your mutations, but unless you understand genetics and you know how to really dig deep, you won't get all the information. Like, for instance, the ApoA5 that I mentioned, or the caffeine I think you get, but the genetics related to athletic performance some people want to see, or how you respond to certain foods in your diet, you won't see that unless you know where to look. So you have to download the raw data and you have to do a whole bunch of things. So it is interesting, but most people that do the 23andMe, what they get out of it most often is the information about where they came from, right? So yeah, my family came from Europe and such. So
what other ones have you tried?
I have not tried. It's just 23andMe because they're the ones that actually do genotyping that is very comprehensive. 920 something thousand SNPs is a lot. I knew of 2 other companies that were doing that, but I just chose to go with 23andMe. I don't see how other companies will be different, but I don't know, so I would have to check to tell you for sure. Okay, so the question is, when it comes to nuts, does it matter if you're eating raw or roasted? No, as long as you are roasting without adding sugar, oil, or salt. It's basically the same. The thing is, when you roast, you can treat more because it tastes better. But what we do is, when I add, like I said, nuts should be garnish, or they should be a complement to a meal, not a meal in itself. So when I make rice and I have cashews, I roast just the amount that I need. I don't roast everything. If I roasted everything I had in the house, it would be gone. But I roast just the amount that goes in the rice, and when it's done, nobody eats it anymore because roasted is better. Then you ask if it matters the amount of omega-3 versus omega-6. It does. Generally, for regular nuts that you're just eating, not so much. If you're not eating excess, then it shouldn't be a problem. The most problem, and I talk about it in the article on fish oil, the one that was published last week, so when you read, you see that. The problem that we Americans have this imbalance between the ratio between omega-3 and 6 is mostly because of oils, not because of whole nuts. When you eat a lot of oil, the majority of the oils are going to be omega-6 rich, and that's how you cause this imbalance, right? So if you're avoiding oils and you're just eating the nuts, then you should keep a good ratio, because the ratio is 1 to 4, so there's still room for you to eat more omega-6 than 3, and it's fine, but oil is critical. As long as you're eating oil, your omega-6 is always going to be way higher than what it should be. And then that's something that we say in the fish oil article is, a lot of people supplement omega-3, and it doesn't matter if they are eating the standard American diet and if they're eating a lot of oil, they are taking supplements, but they are bombarding their body with omega-6. It's never going to get the right ratio, so it doesn't matter. You're just taking supplements for nothing. If I have any comparison, like health benefits of cheese made from cow or goat versus cheese made from plants, in terms of biomarkers of health benefits, no. I don't know any study that was done just by having vegetarians eat cow's milk or cheese versus plant milk. What we do know is the effects that dairy, especially cheese, will have on health, because dairy, it's something we talked about in my lecture yesterday. Dairy increase the expression of TOR and IGF-1, and those two molecules are they stimulate growth. So any disease related to growth, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, your risk is going to be a lot higher if you have dairy in your diet. So dairy as a standalone will change gene expression, in which you shift our biochemistry toward proliferation. So more risk for cancer, more with prostate and breast cancer, colon cancer, and more risk for type 2 diabetes, more risk for obesity. But I don't know of any studies that have done this just by having people eating plant cheese. I don't. I would say, just from knowing the literature, I would say that it would maybe increase your risk of being overweight because of the amount of fat. But I don't know. There's no study showing if there's proliferation that goes on with plants. I would think not, but it's just an assumption. It's not scientific evidence. That's a great question. This started for two reasons. One, for instance, it can be whole food vegan diet, but plant-based physicians, for instance, they will eat honey. They have nothing against honey. For them, honey is the same as agave nectar, the same as molasses. It's an added sugar that you can use when you cook. Vegans will not eat honey. There's something else. What is it? So whole food plant-based people will never eat sugar, white sugar, because white sugar is not vegan. Plant-based people will not pay attention if the wine was filtered using bones or whatever, and vegans will. So, and that's the only reason why physicians say plant-based, just because they want people to focus not what they're avoiding, but what they need to bring in. I would think that if you say whole food vegan, for a lot of people will be great already. It's embrace both, and for me it makes sense. It's just that physicians prefer to say plant-based because then the focus is what you need to be eating, not what you need to be avoiding. And that's the only difference that I say exists. But it's basically the same thing. Yes, okay, so the question is, because I work in an academic medical center, what is it the impact of this message has in a place like a school of medicine, where in theory we are training the doctors of the future in conventional medicine? So he wanted to know how is it that this has, if the message has impacted people, and it has, which is amazing. So what we did is, we started the program 5 years ago, and we thought, one person doesn't create a lot of change by himself or herself. So one of the first things that we did is, instead of people having to hear from me, they're going to hear from people that have been doing that for 20, 30 years. So we started something called a grand rounds. Grand rounds is any lecture that is put together to give continuing medical education credits to physicians. So every physician needs to take a number of credits every year to show that they continue to learn in medicine. So it's a requirement. So what we did was created a grand round series where they could get credits to learn about plant-based nutrition. And it was amazing. And the other thing that we did too is, and I thought that was important, not only did we bring the physicians and the researchers to come and talk, but we also create a space where the physicians could have time with the speaker without the general audience. So they could be free to ask questions without creating the sense that if they're asking a question, they don't know, okay? So, and that has been very successful. So the first person we brought was Esselstyn, and it was great. So we always match the physician with the specialty. So when we brought Esselstyn to speak about prevention of heart or reversal of heart disease with plant-based nutrition, we invited a cardiologist. And we had them spend 4 hours together, and we had working, like a working breakfast, 4 hours together. And then you can ask any questions, tell us about this, and the speakers were very engaging too. So it was a friendly environment that allowed them to expand their understanding in nutrition. And then of course, if it's a working breakfast for 4 hours, they eat nothing but plant-based, which is great too, right? So they're forced to eat our food. And the results were amazing. Something else that we did too is when we have the lectures, we always bring the food, and students and staff love free food. So they always show up and say, I don't care what they're talking about, I have the food they grab, but then they like it. And what's starting to happen is physicians and staff start changing their diet, and we start receiving emails say, after Dr. Esselstyn was here, I changed my diet, and this is what happened. And they say, I lost 20 pounds. You know the stories we always hear. So that's one thing that we did that was very, very successful. We just had Michael Greger was the last one. It was back in February, and we had faculty member who changed, and they say he left usually it's like that. They leave the lecture and they said, I'm not going to do this anymore, and someone left, and 2 months later he hosted a lunch, and he hired the same chef as we use, and he said, now I'm only going to have plant-based lunches at our work environment. It was not even at his house, it was. So it has changed. The blog is great too, because we have a lot of staff and faculty that write us back to ask specific questions. What do you think about this? Can I drink shakes, protein shakes? A lot of people ask me about that, so it was great. And then last year, which is the most wonderful news, is we start teaching medical students. It's not a required class yet. We're going to make it happen in the next few years, but it's an elective. And the students absolutely loved it. And the way we did it is, and it's an evening lecture, so it's not something that a lot of people would like to do. It starts at 5:30. But every week, we bring a different type of food for them, which is plant-based. So one night is Mediterranean, one is pizza. And then what they say, I could never tell that this pizza, I could never think that pizza could taste that amazing without cheese. So they learn through experience. They say, it doesn't matter how many times you teach about plant-based nutrition, if people don't have the experience, or the experience is not positive, it's not something that is going to change. And something else that we did is, it's 3 months long, the class. We ask each one of the students to pick one habit to change. It didn't have to be diet related, but a lot of people did change. One of the students decided to give up dairy, and I say, don't try to give everything up at once, and I explain why it's easier to do 1 month at a time, eliminate something. It's a lot easier. And she gave up there and she lost 20 pounds through, and everybody's seeing these results, and they are very excited this year. We're going to have the second class. And then when Gregor came to speak, there were about 25 students. They start being volunteers. Anytime we have something, they want to be engaged. So it's going to start changing a lot more. And we have 2 trainings coming up that is to train physicians. They're outside of UC Davis or anywhere in the world that want to learn more about plant-based nutrition. So it is having a big, big impact. So it's amazing. I really Yes, if fats make you more tired. What I know is that fats are harder to digest, and the higher the amount of fat in your diet, the more you feel like napping in the afternoon. It's very, it demands a lot more from your body to digest fat. The same for animal protein, but sometimes you give up animal protein, but your fat is still higher. You're still gonna have, you just need spend a lot of energy to digest that. And if you're eating less, and if you don't eat the oils, and your diet is less than 20%, usually you won't experience that. I never nap. Balsamic vinegar and salad is perfect. Any amount you want, any flavor, continue to do that. Perfect. Yeah, you got points for that. Yes. Okay, so the 2 questions is, I mentioned before that white sugar is not vegan. No, it's not. Because the process for, it's not vegan, white sugar, because the process for the sugar to become white requires like passage through bone char, that's it. Only in the US, yes, like beet sugar, it's not the case. But the thing is, nobody should be eating white sugar anyway, so everybody's better not eating white sugar, no matter if it's vegan or not. And your second question is, when you eat sugar, you lose your taste for vegetables. Yeah, the thing is, and we talk about a lot about this in this new series that we're just writing now to avoid added sugar, added oil, and added salt. It's all 3 of them. All 3 of them decrease your sensitivity to enjoy the flavors of fruits and vegetables. All 3. It's not just sugar. It's excess sugar, excess oil or fat, and excess salt. And something that happens, salt, which is going, any salt. It's any sugar, any oil, any salt. That's great news. It makes it easy. So next week's article is salt, and we're going to be discussing this if you read. And something interesting that happens with salt is the more salt you have in your food, the more fat you eat indirectly. And this has been scientifically proven too. So if you want to, the more you were able to reduce your salt, the better you're going to do in reducing your fat along with it. Okay, and then the taste buds adjust, and just so people that starting, usually about 12 weeks and you're good to go. The first weeks are not good, not pleasant, you know. Remove salt from your cookie and nothing's gonna taste good. Then you just have to believe that eventually your sensitivity is going to start changing, and then you're going to start enjoying food better. It's the same with oils and sugar, but salt is one that is the hardest for most people, believe it or not, even harder than sugar. Is my sister on a plant-based diet, on and off. Anytime she sees me speak, she's on. Her problem is not so much being plant-based, is avoiding added sugar, added oil, added salt, and high-fat foods. She doesn't like to cook, but every time she hears me speak, she said, "Oh, I'm so inspired. I'm starting again." So, and when I talk to her and I say, "I know you're going to make it," and she said, "You're the only one," and I say, But it's true. I always believe that people are capable. I know she's going to make it. Like I know a lot of people that are close to me are going to make it. It's just that it takes longer for some people than others. And that's why we need to be very patient and not, be, a drag to us that are around us and that we love, because it's very important. Everybody's going to get there, if only by following our example, only by looking at us. And the thing that is important, and I learned the hard way, is the less you talk about it, the more people will follow. But the more you talk about, the less they follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Oh, yes.
Dr. Rosane Oliveira.
Mahalo, everyone. Good night.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.